Let's just start on the news of the day and the departure of Brett Harrison. What exactly is going on? How long has this been in the works, and where does it leave FTX US?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of thing that, would go public were it not to have been, in the works for a little while. I'm excited about a pathway forward. I'm really excited about our leadership. And, ultimately, it's important that, we go in directions that we feel best in, and that he does as well. And really excited about our, upcoming, Miami headquarters.
Does it affect, you think, your valuation? I know that CNBC has said you're looking to raise another $1 billion. Orlando Bravo in the FT said he's willing to invest further. Does this affect, the level at which investors are going to be willing to put more money in?
In which direction?
Well, down, because if you want to stay at $32 billion, which I think was the valuation in January after the crash of Bitcoin and now this, it may make some investors skittish.
I mean, honestly, that's up for them to decide. I would be pretty surprised, and I would not want them as investors. So good riddance if that's what they think.
Well, if we could just talk about kind of succession more broadly, though, because Brett Harrison's departure is not the only noteworthy one we have seen at crypto firms just in recent weeks. The Celsius CEO stepping down, obviously the bankruptcy at issue there, but Jesse Powell over at Kraken. There has been a string of these departures. Are you thinking about your own plan, how long you plan to stay at the helm, and ultimately who is going to take your place when the day comes?
I'm going to be here for the long term. I have no plans to leave. That is not something that is on my horizon. And, I would not be spending a lot of my energy looking at succession planning that was not going to come into effect here. So.
All right. So what about, Sam, the valuation of the company? I mean, since January, you've grown, obviously. You have a much bigger footprint. You're arguably the most important person and company in crypto right now. On the other hand, the underlying assets have come down a lot in value, right? In January, we were already looking at 45,000, 40,000, 35,000, but now we're looking at 20 and sometimes flirting with a 17 handle.
It's a good question. And, I think I sort of agree with your take on it that, I think we've seen a lot of growth as a company in terms of market share and in terms of, what the scope of what we can do is. At the same time, you've seen just global risk assets sell off as the dollar strengthens. How do those cancel out? I don't know. They're pushing in opposite directions. And I think ultimately, you could imagine that those roughly cancel out. But, obviously, ultimately, we're going to have to see what the market decides.
Yeah, but as Matt has alluded to, the market has been difficult. How much harder has that made your fundraising efforts?
Oh, it's certainly the case that, venture capital is way less active right now in general. I mean, you go back to, a year ago, and there was more money looking to be deployed by venture capitalists than there were things to deploy it in. Like it was a bit of a free for all. And there was a lot of determination to, compete, to get investments, as in to get allocations for things to invest in. You look at the environment today, and it's very different. Today, there's not a lot of capital being invested anywhere really in the financial ecosystem. Not so much because of interest rates themselves, as because of just a lot of uncertainty about which direction rates are going to be going in, about where they're going to end up, about what policy, the Fed's going to take, what policy Congress is going to take on spending bills. And so, I think that certainly has slowed down, general investment markets quite a bit.
You told our David Rubenstein that you'd had mixed results in terms of the acquisitions that you had done. A lot of people saw you as throwing a lifeline to the industry, so you weren't necessarily trying to make huge profits. That's what you said your mandate was to your team. How do you think you've fared now, and especially considering the situation at Voyager? You've gone in to pick up those assets. As you sort of do the tally on the back of your napkin there, how have you fared?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And, I think that at the end of the day, that has basically been our mandate, has been to do okay deals here, to do deals that we feel okay with from a corporate perspective. And then to do what we can to backstop the ecosystem, to protect customers and to, in the case of the Voyager deal, get customers back their assets as quickly as possible rather than leaving them in limbo for a while. So, I think that we're excited about, where it's going. And, more importantly, though, I think that, we will hopefully be able to give a prompt resolution to customers. And that is the biggest piece of this, rather than seeing this primarily as a, financial opportunity.
Well, Sam, obviously now that you have won the auction for these Voyager assets, it's just more tentacles, if you will, being spread throughout the crypto system as a whole. Do you worry that this is going to intensify the criticisms that now you have too much influence over this industry?
I mean, I would love someone else to go backstop the industry. I think it's better for me to do it than for no one to. But look, if someone else wants to do it, like, absolutely be my guest. We've reached out to a lot of people. Has not ultimately ended, in the way that that I think we were hoping it might. But my goal is not to be monopolizing. It's like my goal is just to make sure customers are protected, and to make sure that there is something responsible in place to help accomplish that. I think that we can do that here and in other places. I also think it's worth noting that this does not represent a fundamental sort of growth in the type of things that we do as a business. This is very much in line with products that we offer or we're looking to offer, as from the exchange standpoint. And so, I also think that it's not a huge shift from that perspective, especially given the state of Voyager right now.
Well, those products are going to change a little bit, or at least now you're invested in Skybridge. Sonali was just giving us an excellent breakdown of the differentiation between TradFi and DeFi. Those seem to be coming back together as well.
Yep.
Is that what you want to do with Skybridge? They have a big portfolio of traditional finance products, investments, fundraising, et cetera. Is that why you bought in?
That definitely has a lot to do with it. They have a lot of experience and, deep relationships and network and, build outs in traditional finance. We're really excited to work with those. And, we think that blockchain rails have a lot, frankly, to offer traditional finance when you look at the settlement issues that, we've seen in the financial ecosystem. And so I think combining together a lot of the technology from the crypto ecosystem with the with products we want from traditional finance, at least we think it's a really promising future.
Well, Matt talks about buying into things, Sam. I'm wondering if there's anything else you're actively looking to buy into, and frankly, how much powder you have left to do any kind of deal, given all of the deals you've already been working.
Yeah, we've tried to be somewhat judicious, frankly, with the deals that we've been doing, and obviously that's not going to be perfect, and we have obviously made some expenditures through that, but we have not used the majority of the cash that we have on our balance sheet. Yeah. That's not necessarily to say that there are other things imminently here. So much as that we want to be flexible, and we want to be in a position where we are looking forward at what we can be doing, where we can be most helpful, and where we can grow the most. So, I think how I would describe us right now is as exploring. And, I don't know if that's going to necessarily lead anywhere. It might not. But, we're going to continue poking around.
That reminds me of one of the other cool things that Bravo said in the FT. He thinks that a lot of people in the industry are disturbing in terms of their lack of transparency. You're not one of those people. Obviously, he is willing to invest in you again. How much cash is on your balance sheet? What kind of free cash flow are you generating? How much are you burning through?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we were profitable last year. I, expect that, we'll likely be profitable this year as well. And you can look, we raised, all things considered, a couple $2 billion last year. We have done a number of acquisitions. We've generated some, free cash flow just with revenue. When you kind of try and combine all of those things together at the end of the day, I think you're left with, upwards of $1 billion. There's some definitional issues here which are worth noting around regulatory capital and other things, which make it not trivial to define exactly what the right number to talk about is. But we still have some fair bit of dry powder.
Well, Sam, you said regulatory, so I do want to talk about regulation now, especially as we've had a number of stories just circulating in the last 24, 48 hours or so, including New York Attorney General here in New York, Letitia, is accusing Nexo of falsely claiming that it was a licensed broker-dealer. Then in South Korea, you have prosecutors freezing $67 million worth of assets tied to Do Kwon, who they are seeking to arrest. You also have Ethereum's latest upgrade, known as the merge, that could be triggering widespread tax confusion in the UK. And on top of all of that, we hear from the chairman of the Federal Reserve earlier today talking about the need for more crypto oversight. Just take a listen to what he said.
There's a real need for more appropriate regulation so that as DeFi expands and starts to touch more and more retail customers and that sort of thing, so that appropriate regulation is in place.
So more regulation is needed, but of course you already know that, and that's something you've been working on for some time now. Do you feel like we're getting closer to some kind of real framework, or at least having organized jurisdiction, what the CFTC and SEC each control separately?
So I do think that there's been a lot of progress made, and I'm really excited for that. I think that that's a key thing, for the industry going forward. And I do think that we've made, a lot of progress. You look at where we were a year ago with very little going on the regulatory side. You look today where there are, proposals in Congress to provide clarity for spot cryptocurrency assets, where the SEC and CFTC are both working on regimes, where you have stablecoin bills going through. We obviously have been applying for licensure, with the CFTC and are in active discussions with the SEC as well. It is really a world of difference, and I think that's pretty exciting. And I agree that there needs to be clear federal oversight here, to really protect consumers, and at the same time to be able to provide clarity for the industry to operate in the country. And I think we're making a lot of progress on both those fronts.
You've been very active in Washington, famously doing some lobbying for the industry there. What about overseas? We note that the FCA published a warning against FTX this month for targeting consumers there without authorization. And, other firms, Nexo, for example, has gotten in trouble coming this direction in New York. Is it hard to do business globally? I mean, you are based in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of jurisdictions, and we try and maintain strong relationships everywhere with regulators. And, in the UK, we have a good relationship there. We're actively working on licensing, and we believe that we are operating in a responsible manner there. We are going back and forth on details, but yeah, it is at its core, it is a really big production. To be doing all of this in a number of jurisdictions. We would certainly love to see a world, hypothetically, where there was more of, more cooperation between jurisdictions, something that looked more like a global joint regulatory regime, instead of a, sort of country by country one. I think it's gonna be time before we get there. And, in the meantime, we're just gonna keep, plugging along on all fronts.
Well, you said you're working on licensing in the UK. What kind of license exactly are you seeking, and how much are you planning to invest in your business there?
I think it's not super public exactly what we're doing there, but we in general looking at comprehensive licensure. When we look at these things, we're looking ideally at ways that we can offer something like our full product suite, that we can be able to be really competitive, and that's what we'd be looking to do there as well.
I would like to be in the Bahamas also. I get totally why you're there, both regulatorily and also just the weather is nice and the place is totally chill. But you said in your congratulatory tweet to Brett today that he is going to be at your Miami HQ, and that got a lot of responses from crypto Twitter. Why don't you move your headquarters into the U.S. and to Miami? It's like the capital of Bitcoin here.
Well, it's a good question. We do have our U.S. headquarters there. There's a question, and no matter what, we're going to have different, basically different, operations in different jurisdictions. Like we're going to have, we're licensed in Japan. We're going to have, an operation there. And so, part of the answer, the sort of boring part of the answer, is that, we're going to have, basically licensure all over the place and offices all over the place. In order to support, a global business. A question you could ask though is like, what set of things, we can and can't offer from our U.S. entity And on that front, I think that we are very actively looking to try to build out the licensing suite there. And I think the biggest things that we're looking at are basically, first of all, what is a spot regime? We'd love to have a federally registered spot market there. Second of all, a futures regime. We're obviously actively working on that. With the CFTC on commodity futures. And there are a few other pieces of this, general token registrations as well. But frankly, for us, I think having like clear licensure for marketplaces is by far the biggest piece of this. That's what we've been focusing on.
Clearly, there is just so much to talk with you about, and I wish we had all day, but we only have about a minute left here. So just on a very high level kind of pricing note, obviously Bitcoin has been languishing in this $20,000 range for months now. Do you think the bottom is in, and where realistically do you think it can get to by the end of the year?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I think what I'd say is, look, like, I think that it's going to be responsive to macro. I think if the dollar moves, it moves against everything. It moves against risk assets. It moves against stocks, that moves against crypto. So that's sort of a boring part of the answer. But maybe a more interesting, hopefully more interesting one, I would say is that I think that getting regulatory clarity and federal oversight in the United States would be huge for confidence and institutional adoption in crypto. I think that's probably the single biggest thing that I'm hoping for on the horizon. And I think outside of that, just more use cases, more focus on use cases. That's always going to be huge. It's always going to be important. It's something the space always should be focusing on, probably more than it is. And so that's the other, I think, piece of this that I am really excited to see play out.